So writing a script is maybe the ultimate thing that seems simple until you actually sit down and try it. And I know what I'm talking about because over the last 10 years I've written dozens and dozens of scripts across plays, animation, web series, short films, feature films, but I gotta keep reminding myself this shouldn't be just another bedroom talking about film YouTube channel. It's a practical, real world filming YouTube channel. So in this video I'll not just be focusing on the scripts, but I'll also be focusing on the scripts that I've actually made into proper productions. Because after all, if I went to all the effort of writing a script, I wanted to make that thing. And for the last 10 years I succeeded in that. If I wrote a play, I made a play. If I wrote a film, I made a film.
I don't know what you're talking about. I won't forget this, do you hear me?
And if I wrote a web series, I made a web series. Takes a lot of effort to write, so if I write, yeah, I want to make it, of course I do. But it wasn't a journey without a lot of trial and error, so in this video I'm going to be going through some of my old projects to find some of my biggest screenwriting mistakes to help you in your next project. So to prepare for the making of this video, I have had to open my drawer of scripts. In this drawer, somehow or other, I still have a physical copy of every script I've ever created. I've been writing for really as long as I can remember, so we have a lot to unpack here. And there's a lot of mistakes to unpack here as well, from overlong dialogue, incorrect formatting, forced coincidences, and plot contrivances, and just bad writing. Okay, whew, that's a lot of scripts. So, as you can probably tell, I don't have a problem with sitting down and writing. What I do have a problem with is, getting all my ideas to make sense and form a cohesive theme with believable and convincing characters over 100 minutes or more. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, this might have been a bad idea. This does seem a little bit unwieldy. Like, where am I even supposed to start analysing all these? So let's start with my most recent project, Gardener's Planet. Okay, so this film, Gardener's Planet, which I'm only now just finishing post-production on, has probably gone through the most amount of drafts of any script I've ever written. I'm not even kidding. This is the most amount of drafts and probably the most of printing pages I've ever printed off as well for any script. So one reason I think Gardener's Planet had such a long and laborious scriptwriting process was because really for the longest time I wasn't sure exactly what this film was about. My plan from draft one that it was going to be about a reality TV couple appearing on a TV show who had a dark secret, but for the longest time I didn't have a clue what that dark secret was going to be. And it was only till around draft 10 or so that the aliens actually came into it, and that's eventually what the film became. But for like 10 drafts I didn't have a clue what it would be. I didn't know what the themes were going to be. I didn't know what the genre would be. I just had this idea that I felt was a cool idea, but it took me a long time to find out where I wanted to bring that idea. Okay, so I guess my advice with Gardener's Planet to my past self, I guess, would just be, to know what you're writing before you write it. It's going to save you a lot of time. And by that I mean, know what your genre is, know what your third act is. It's okay to start with a good idea or a strong idea. Every film is a creative exercise, and to a degree, big or large, you're always trying to find the film as you're making it. But the more of an idea you have where you want to bring the script, the easier that script writing process is actually going to be. Okay, and now we move on to the next project I wrote, my first ever feature film, I'm Talking to You. Okay, so this is my first ever feature film, and I really wanted to make a big, impressive first feature film, and I felt the more things that were in the story, the more characters, the more situations, the better that film would be. But to my surprise, actually the opposite was the case. Basically, I'm Talking to You is a film of two halves, where it's about the guards on the motorway, but it's also about this subplot with a politician. And basically that subplot with the politician became too big, became too complex. The heart of the film really was between the two guards on the motorway, but this subplot that I wrote into the script threatened to overthrow and unbalance the whole production. And I vividly remember how this affected us on set as well. When it came time to shoot the politician scenes, a lot of the shooting and character scenes that we were doing with them, and the plot scenes really is what I should call them, because that's what this subplot was about. It was way too plot heavy and not enough characters in it. But it felt very arbitrary and random, and even the actors playing the scenes in the political story struggled with that. So that was a major lesson to me, not to be adding in all the stuff that it didn't need. I felt like the bigger it was, the more impressive it would be. But actually the bigger it was, the more it just confused people, and I would have been better off making this a lot more of a simpler, stripped down film with less characters, less intrigue, more simplicity, and explore that simplicity a lot more. Okay, and so I guess my advice with I'm talking to you is when you're writing a script, just to strip it back to its bare essentials and just focus on what the key themes and key characters are. And really what saved I'm talking to you was when it was rewritten in the animatic stage. So we came back and we did block 2 and block 3, and we did a lot more intensive animatics and storyboards, and that helped me just visualize the scene. And so when I was kind of doing some patchwork here and there with the politician story, I wasn't adding in anything more that I really needed. And I felt really bad, you know, because you don't want actors feeling that they're superfluous somewhat to the plot. If you go through all the trouble of casting actors and they're there on the day, you want them to feel and to know that their character is absolutely integral to the plot of the film they're making. And now we move on to my 2011 play, Not While There's Work to Be Done. Okay, and I want to actually bring two projects in on this because I wrote this play in 2011 and I got some criticism on this play that has haunted me ever since. Okay, so I had written this play, totally normal, about a father and son looking for a missing mule. Everyone seemed really happy, and my friend Emmeline came to it, and what she said was after she watched the play, it sounded like all the characters were talking like me, and that absolutely shocked me. I was like, what the hell? Oh my god, I never even thought about this, and it still does kind of haunt me, but fair play to her genuinely for saying it, because that is a really good note to give to a young screenwriter as a kind of a warning. So that was something I learned on, or a mistake I made, I guess, on that play. And what I want to compare that to then is my other script on Poxy Bleeding Shop, where having learned how important dialogue is, maybe the hard way from some criticism, but also maybe the best way, it made me much more aware of how people talk. And some of my documentaries, I think partly was an experiment in me looking and listening how people talk and trying to bring that into my script. And certainly for Poxy Bleeding Shop, that was the culmination of a lot of those experiments. Now, I also was working in the shop where I set this animation web series, but so much of the dialogue in that web series was real dialogue that was spoken to me by the customers in the shop. And as I've mentioned before, very often, as some of the customers would come up to me ordering their drink and alcohol and they'd be telling me stories, I'd have the computer, you know, facing them towards me. I'd be talking, going, yeah, I hear you, pretending I was cashing them up. But really, I was typing up their story and I was saving that as PDFs and Word documents and saving it for future projects. And so Poxy Bleeding Shop was a very successful example, I think, of where the dialogue was very original, if you want to call it very original, because it was somewhat stolen, but certainly didn't sound like it was coming out of my mouth. And it was a lot more influenced by the real world. You know, some characters obviously can be an avatar for the author, but not all of them. Do you know what I mean? Characters have to be different. They have to have different points of view. And that's partly where a conflict comes in the story too. Okay, cool. Hope you found that helpful. I'm trying to do a video a week at the moment, so that kind of puts time constraints on the amount of work I can put into every video, because you've literally got to have a video out every 7 days. But I'm still trying to make them as substantial as I possibly can. So now that I've dived into some of my biggest screenwriting mistakes, what are some tips that I actually have for screenwriting? And I have a few, I hope, substantial tips as well. One would be, you know, and these are tips for actually if you're actually making the script, obviously, you know, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's, well, it kind of does if it's a play, but if it's a short film you're making, a feature film or a web series, you know, I guess these are for you. So if you're taking your script to the next step and actually making it in the real world, have a primary filming location. You know, we did that for Gardener's Planet, where we shot so much of it in the house. Popular Irish filmmaker Damien McCarthy has done that a lot with Caveat, set in the house, Oddity set in another house, and Hokum, which is now set in a hotel. And a lot of independent filmmakers do that, and the filmmakers that are successful, I think, understand that, you know, constraints can be a very good and liberating thing, and also not just liberating, but also economically important as well. that you have one primary location and you can shoot the hell out of it, and you can essentially get a feature film out of that if you want to. And the Duplass brothers did that as well with Baghead. Has anyone seen that movie? It's a good independent movie to reference. Always the Duplass brothers are good to reference. Where will I go? I'll just go up here a little more. Next tip would be just have 4 or 5 characters. You don't need any more than 4 or 5 characters. Having more than 4 or 5 is just more people to coordinate with, more people who will risk dropping out, not showing up, not taking it seriously. So just have 4 or 5 people in it and give them all substantial parts. That makes a lot of sense. Just looking around the corner here, we're all good. And then my final tip would be probably choose a genre. Choose a genre to emulate, and look at the rules and what other people have done within that genre, and figure out where they've broken Act 1 into Act 2 and Act 2 into Act 3. You know, I used all these tips making Gardener's Planet, and honestly they did save me. You'll find a lot of creativity in that, you know. Sometimes I find if you start with a kind of smaller, simpler project and then fill that with creativity, it makes more sense than trying to make a bigger project and make that creative. It just becomes too big and too unwieldy. Okay, this has been a fun video to make, and I've really actually enjoyed going through and digging out some of my old scripts. I'll have to make time to go through them properly at some stage. There's a lot of sentimentality and nostalgia involved, and a lot of personal history in those scripts as well. But anyway, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget, if you found any of this educational, interesting, or even vaguely entertaining, then please do consider liking and subscribing, and I'll be back with another video from the world of independent filmmaking very soon.